Hey guys, I've got a lovely, very little game to share with you today. It's one that I won in 9 moves, and it's one of my absolute favourite little lines. So just a little bit of background. What I've been doing recently, I've not been having brilliant results playing the Black Lion defence against 1e4. So I've been I'm now going more towards playing e5, so e4, e5, and then see what my opponent does in response to that. And then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build up a repertoire of openings that are super aggressive, sharp, and dangerous. This is definitely one of them. So what I want to show you today is an example of the Traxler Counter Attack. Okay. And it comes from the Italian game, and it's one of those kind of opening lines that if your opponent isn't familiar with it, they are extremely likely to fall foul and to get into a lot of trouble. If they do know what to do and they play the correct moves, then the game is probably looking fairly even. Okay, but I think particularly in blitz or shorter time formats, you should have a lot of success in this. So let me take you through the game. Okay, so my opponent is Speculator 8, rated 1427, very decent rating in my book. Okay, so e4, e5 was played, knight to f3, knight to c6, and we have the standard king's pawn, 2 knights, and then the bishop comes out to c4, so we have the Italian game on the board. All right, now what's White thinking at this point? White's thinking, look, wouldn't it be great if I can get my knight here to g5 and then into f7 with a fork on the queen and the rook, right? And when you then play, if you're black, knight to f6, White might get a little bit excited, and you're kind of banking on that. So White comes in, flying in with the knight, and there's really no good way to defend the f7 pawn at this point. You can't put the queen in there because you're not going to capture with the queen and give up your queen and force your king to move in return for 2 minor pieces. It's just doesn't make sense. D5 is an option, but the Traxler continues with bishop to c5. You are just ignoring this attack, this deadly attack that White has against f7. Right, your standard Achilles heel. Everyone's Achilles heel is that king's bishop's pawn. Right, the f pawn is a vulnerability, and very often you will find. So, how long did White take over his next move? 9 seconds. He looked at it. He looked at it and he thought, I can't see anything wrong with this. And you might think the same. What could be wrong with this? The knight comes in, grabs the pawn, weakens the king's position, forks a rook and a queen, and it's defended by a bishop. What could possibly go wrong? Well, this is where you launch your counter attack. Okay, so if you notice, Black has got the knight on f6, knight on c6, and also the bishops are mirrored. So it's actually a very similar position. It's almost identical here. Then the knight comes in, we bring our bishop out. Okay, now watch. This is what happens. Knight comes in, grabs the pawn. We ignore it. Bishop takes f2. Boom. Right, now. And it comes with check. So White has to do something. Now, apparently the best move here is king to f1. And I think I might have had that maybe once, right? But generally what happens is the king's thinking, White's thinking, okay, he's just sacrificed a piece, he's desperate, he's messed up his opening, and I've still got this lovely fork going on here. I'm a pawn up already. Oh, I'm not a pawn up actually, because we've just grabbed a pawn with a sack. So what will very often happen, now white thought for a minute and a half, 1 minute 39 over this next move, and decided to grab the bishop, which is what you will quite often see. Now, if you're black, you are now rubbing your hands at this point, because your next move, knight captures e4, check. Okay, now white is now thinking, I've got this king in the middle of the board. Your queen can come flying out to f6, right? And so basically what's happened is we've completely taken the initiative away from white. White thinks, I've got this killer fork going on, there's no escape for black, and in their excitement will, you know, quite often blunder into this and fall foul. So, I mean, what can white do at this point? So let's have a look. So clearly the king has to move. There's no piece that can capture the knight. Okay, king can't go there, and so he's got these squares available. Very unlikely to want to move into the board. So I think that f3 is very unlikely, because you'd be looking at the queen coming out there. So there's a lot of problems that can happen. So in the game, white's king moved back to e1, then queen to h4 check, and this is a fairly common pattern you might see, might be reminiscent of some King's Gambit lines and stuff like that. Okay, now so he didn't think for too long, 2.9 seconds over this one, and actually g3 is an error at this point, because knight takes g3. The pawn can't recapture because the queen will just snatch the rook, and we're up on material, and the king's in serious trouble. In fact, I think that would be checkmate. No, almost, because the king would then be forced to come to f2, at which point you can then grab the queen. So I mean, it's game over if the pawn takes. Okay, so he thought for another 3 minutes over this move, brought the queen out to f3, but then knight takes rook with check. And you know, what can white do at this point? My opponent now resigned. This is move 9. My opponent resigns at this point. So white can't move the king to here because it's still in check by the queen. So what can he do? So he's got 3 squares potentially he could move to. Now let's look at each of these in turn. So let's think about if king moves to d1, we've then got knight to f2 check. It's just going to create a whole world of pain. So there's the few videos on YouTube. If you want to look at a little bit deeper into this, then go ahead. But basically there are lots of horrible things that can happen. This knight will very often fly in, still threatening, threatening the queen, of course, and threatening the fork on c2. It's just a world of pain, really. You could have ideas of maybe castling there, but that then leaves the king vulnerable to a discovered attack if the knight moves. But yeah, look, there's so many things that can go wrong. You might play d5 and then try and bring the bishop into the attack, then castle queenside. There's so many things that can go horribly wrong. So if you're an e4 e5 player as black, you need to know about this, right? If you are an e4 player, and if you play the Italian game as white, you need to know about this. You need to know how to avoid it, and if you see that bishop sacrifice on f2, do not take, because everything's going to fall apart. So yeah, I love it when I get an opportunity to play this, and I was really happy when it transpired this morning and my opponent went for it. And even in a 30-minute game, against a 1400 rated player, this can still be absolutely devastating. So, if you like playing Blitz, then this is definitely one to have in your toolkit. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.